Hello students, welcome back. In the last session we have discussed method overriding with some example programs in Python. In today's session we'll be discussing about encapsulation and information hiding in Python. So let's start. Encapsulation is one of the fundamental concepts of object-oriented programming. Encapsulation describes the idea of wrapping data and the methods that work on the data within a unit. So encapsulation simply means wrapping up of data and methods into a single unit. And wrapping the data and methods into a single unit actually puts restrictions on accessing variables and methods directly, and that can prevent accidental modification of data. So when we wrap data and methods into a single unit, that restricts the access to the data by external entity, which prevents accidental modification of the data. To prevent the accidental change, an object's variable can only be changed by an object's method. To prevent accidental change to the variables, what we can do is we can make a variable in such a way that only the object's method can make changes to the data, and those types of variables are known as private variables. Private variables. You might have studied about private variables in Java, where private variables are declared with a access specifier private. And once a variable is private, that means only the methods within the class can access the private variables. Methods outside the class or any object outside the class cannot access the private variables. A class is an example of encapsulation, as it encapsulates all data members, data and functions, variables, etc. Now in the diagram you can see how a class is represented. A class contains both methods and variable. It encapsulates both methods and variables into a single entity like a capsule. Okay, information hiding, as we have discussed, we can hide the variables from external entity by using private variable or by declaring variables private. Now how we can declare, how we can hide variables or how we can make variables private in Python? So in Python, data hiding can be done by adding the double underscore. Now remember, you can see here double underscore as a prefix to the attribute which is to be hidden. So we can hide the data or we can make it as private in Python by using double underscore before the name of the attribute. After this, the attribute will not be visible outside of the class through the objects. Now let us look at one example to understand this, how data hiding works in Python. Okay, this is an example. The class is employee. In the class we have a variable. So the variables which are declared in the class are said to be class variables in Python, remember. So this is a class variable, this is not an instance variable. So class variable count, how it is declared? The class variable count is declared with 2 underscore before the variable name count. Remember, as there are 2 underscore before the variable name count, this count is hidden from the outside objects, or you can say count is a private variable in this class, and the value which is assigned to the count, it is 0. Then we have the constructor, or you can say init method. Inside the init method, what we have done is we have simply incremented the value of count by 1. So you can see employee dot count. Why employee? Employee because employee is the class name, and count is not a instance variable, it is a class variable. So class variable always accessed with a class name. So we have employee dot count is equals to employee dot count plus 1. So that simply means this count is incremented by 1 every time the init is called. So what exactly we have done is we are incrementing the count as we create an object of employee class. So every time we create an object of employee class, init is called and it will increment the count. So that will give us a number of objects of a class. Okay, so this is init. Then we have a method called as display, and display method, in the display method what we are doing is we are simply displaying the variable count. So the number of employees, comma, you can see employee dot count, the value of count variable we are displaying. Okay, so this is a class employee. It contains one private variable count, one constructor and one simple method. Okay, then what we have done, we have created an object of employee here. You can see employee emp is equals to employee. So whenever we create an object of a class, as you know in Python, it will call a init method. So it will call a init method. In the init method we have incremented the count by 1. So initially count was 0, it is incremented by 1, so new value of count is 1. Okay, then we have created one more object of class employee. You can see employee emp2 is equals to employee. So again the init is called, again that will increment the count by 1, and again there is no separate count variable for emp and emp2, remember, because count is class variable, the same count variable is shared by both the objects. So and that is the reason the same count is incremented, and which was 1 earlier, now it is 2. And after that, inside the try block, what we are calling is we are trying to print the value of count variable outside the class. From outside the class I am trying to print the value of count by using the object emp. When I say emp dot underscore underscore of count, so this is this variable, if I try to access that variable from outside the class, this is going to generate an error. Why it will generate an error? Because count variable, it is a private variable, and as per the meaning of private variable, count variable can only be accessed within the class, not outside the class. And when you try to access this outside the class, it is going to throw an error, an exception, and when it throws an exception, it will go to finally block, because we do not have a except block here, but we have a finally block. So it goes to finally block, and in the finally block we are calling a method emp.display. So whenever we call a method emp.display, it goes to display method, and in the display method it will print the count. So what this program demonstrates? This program demonstrates how you can create a private variable. You can create a private variable by having 2 underscore before the variable name, and if you try to access the variable from outside the class, this line explains this. If you try to access the variable outside the class, this is going to generate an error, because that variable is not visible from outside the class, and this is the output of that program. So when we are at this particular line, it is going to throw an error, and it goes to emp.display, which displays emp.count, that is, it is printing 2, and the error message, that is, error message is object has no attribute underscore underscore count. We are trying to access underscore underscore count here, and it is displaying object has no attribute of underscore underscore count. That means that attribute is not visible outside the class. Okay, let me execute this and show you the output as well. Okay, this is our program. And okay, I have saved it. If I execute this, you can see what it displays. It is printing the number of employees, that is 2, but it is also displaying an error, that is employee instance has no attribute count. It is printing this number 2 because we have called in the finally we have called emp.display, which is a proper method display, and this method display, it is inside the employee, and that is the reason it is able to access count. It is able to access count, it is printing the value of count. But when you try to access count from outside the class employee, it is generating an error. Okay, let me remove this line and let me show it to you. Okay, there is an error, indented block. Okay, I have removed that line from the finally block. I have included just a print statement which prints end of program. Actually, it will generate an exception at this point, and that exception is thrown, but there is no except block to catch the exception. But we have a finally block, so it goes to the finally block first, and it executes this. It will execute now the line that is end of program. It will print. Then, as there is no other except blocks, it will simply print the exception which is generated on the console. So let's see. Okay, you can see it is printing the exception employee instance has no attribute count, and now it has not displayed that count of employees because I have removed the display call from the finally block. So this simply explains us ki the count, the private variable count cannot be accessed from outside the class. Okay, that's it in today's session. We have studied about encapsulation and information hiding. In Python, we can hide variables, and even methods can be declared as private by using the same syntax, that is, we can use double underscore before the method name, and even the method cannot be accessed outside the class. Okay, so we have also studied about information hiding in Python in today's session. So that's it. We will stop here. Thank you.